Hello, everybody. So what we're trying to do the next 30 minutes or so is just to walk you through our NHSN application. Majority of what we're going to be looking at has already been reviewed by Angela and also by some of our analysts later in the day. So if I may ask, you know, uh, who among you come from the West Coast here? West Coast? California or where? Arizona. Awesome. Arizona. Oregon? California. So it appears that people from Oregon or California might be the fathers from Atlanta. Will that be correct? Anybody from New York? Oh, we have one New York over there. Well, anybody from Atlanta? We have three people from Atlanta. Awesome. Well, wherever you're coming from, we want to say thank you for coming because this is so important. We're thanking you and we're also thanking your institution for sending you here. And you're going to see one of the reasons why we're expressing this thanks shortly. As you can see here, we have a lot of work to do. Dr. Pollock has mentioned earlier in one of his slides, there's a quote that kind of, reference the importance of looking at people when you see statistics. You actually look at the people and see the tears wiped out. We're talking about a lot of people here. And, if you take a minute to just imagine, these numbers are highly, you know, uh, conservative, if you must say. Because in the next couple of years, like Dr. Bell mentioned, the numbers of adults is going to double. These are numbers from for all the populations. Millions of infections, thousands of hospitalizations, and millions of dollars for taxpayers. So we have a lot of work to do. But for us to do this work correctly, we need to, gain some competency. And in the next 30 minutes, we're hoping that you're able to work up with at least one or two of these learning outcomes. We want to hopefully, to get you familiarized with the architecture of NHSN application, also get you familiarized with how to navigate or find your way around, NHSN application and the important features that it houses. Also to help you learn how to do some basic reporting. If you're going to be assigned to do reporting, we want to make sure that we're getting the best data that we can get from facilities that are participating. We're going to be looking at how to report events and also how to report summary data. We're also going to be talking very briefly on how to do or generate, analysis and reports. We have our analyst here, Elizabeth. She's going to go into that more detail later in the day. This is just to show you what a typical home page will look like. And on the far left hand side, we have all these primary tabs, which is the primary navigation. This primary navigation, houses functionalities that allow you to do a lot of the things that you need to do to be able to complete your NHSN requirements. As you can see, we have things like, survey data, surveys, analysis, users, facilities, groups, and also reporting plan as an example. And we're going to be walking through some of that shortly. So I want to take a minute to walk through this slide, because this slide has an implication for some of the things we're going to be learning as we demonstrate the application. There's at least three concepts that we're trying to grab from this slide. First of all, let's look at the very first column, just kind of depicts how we calculate, how we use our data. It is important that we understand what, all the data that you provide to NHSN, how those data are used. Those contexts are so important in able to gain competency on how to use the application. On the very top there, we have the numerator data, and that is synonymous to what we have as the event data. And at the bottom, we have the denominator data, which is synonymous to what we have as the summary data. Very important concept to grab so that when we begin to look at how to enter data in events and summary data, it begins to make more sense. Another concept we're trying to look at is the events. We have one, two, three, four events there. This is just to depict, like when you submit data, let's say you enter in a particular event. Let's say, and at the bottom also, we're also trying to depict here the concept of quality, which is also ties in with the alerts you're going to be seeing in the demonstration. So let's say, for example, in event one, can anybody, tell us what's going on with event one typically? Anybody? Well, basically, what event one is showing is that we have a missing data there, as you can see at the bottom. And if for event two, we have an incomplete data. So for the events, basically the main focus is on the numerators. We're highly interested in the numerator. So if you're submitting your data and you have a missing data for the numerator for the first event, and you submitted the second event and you have an incomplete data, pretty much we don't have any complete data yet. And if we go to event number three, let's assume that you're successful in completing the event data for event number three. But what happens to the summary data if you miss that? And so also is event number four. So the ideal situation would be we want all those four boxes to be red, for us to have complete data. We want all the effort that we're putting into this to materialize so that we can help the population that we're serving. I also wanted to show this frame here just to help us walk through. This is just an adaptation of our usual checklist that we normally use. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just summarizing this particular checklist. We're going to be looking at annual facility survey. We're going to be looking at the monthly reporting plan, how to enter events data. Then we'll move on to the summary data. Then also just look at the alert as well as analysis. If time permits, we're going to look a little bit on how to, enter users and how to use the facility functions as well. I want to believe in your handbook. I believe in tab number 3. You should have uh, this framework in some form. Let's see if we can find that in our handbook. So this is just a framework that we developed just to help also guide you and also help increase the competency with which you interact with the NHSN application. So pretty much what we're going to be doing here is summarized in some way or fashion in this table. We have the event, the functions in NHS application, as you can see on the far left. We have the definitions. We have some of the capabilities of those functions, and we also have some context with which you can better use these functions. So let's keep a little bit to demonstration. So on this slide here, this is our homepage, and on the far left, like we mentioned, we have all the primary tabs here. So the first thing you want to do, or the first thing you would be expected to do, is to complete your surveys. And typically, what is the main function, or why is it so important for completing the annual survey? You know, it's so important because with all those data that you submit are used for calculation of the rates that we use, risk adjustment rates. It's so important that we get those data. And this data, the very important point to develop competency, particularly for this, for reporting surveys, you want to make sure you understand the duration first of all. Beginning of the month, beginning of the year, from January 1st to March 1st. By those time, you want to make sure you complete your annual survey. The also important thing that you want to note to develop competency in this area is that you want to do this in one sitting. It's very important to do this in one sitting. There's a number of questions. There are about 25 questions. Some of them might require you asking, some parties in your facilities or talking to somebody, you may not have that time, to do this. So it's so important for you to do this in one sitting. And how do you aid that? You aid that by printing or completed a form. Once you complete the form, you have all the information you need to complete this data in a short period of time. So pretty much for the surveys, we have two options here. The first option is to add the survey. And when we complete surveys, we're completing survey for the previous calendar year, not for the current year that we're completing the survey. So for example, if we're in 2019 now, we're going to be completing, we're going to be using data from 2018 to complete that data. Does that make sense? So pretty much, you select the year for which you're completing the survey, the previous calendar year here, and you make sure that all the asterisks here are completed. This is a requirement for completing the annual survey. All the asterisks have to be completed, and a few other ones are optional. And once that is done, we click Save. We also have, from the survey, you also have the option to find a survey. You may be interested in finding a previous survey that your institution has completed. What you do here is click on the function, on this Find function. And let's say we're looking for 2018 data. And this is the survey that was completed in 2018. So the next thing we also want to do after completing the survey is to do the reporting plan. The reporting plan is so important because that is your communication with NHSN, your indication to NHSN about the models you're going to be completing or you're going to be following or surveying, as well as the events that you're going to be reporting. So this is very, very important to complete. And without completing this monthly reporting plan, we're not going to have any data. The framework we showed you earlier is tied to this monthly reporting plan. So this is how we enter a monthly reporting plan. You first of all choose a month for which you want to report your data. Then you choose the year. As we can see here, this particular facility is showing that they're going to be following HAI model, specifically looking at UTI events for this particular month. They're also following a couple of MDROs, including CDF here, as we can see. And they're also following the hand hygiene as well as the gown and glove use measures. And if for any reason we need to edit this plan, we can come down here and click on edit. We can uncheck any particular event that maybe for any reason we're unable to report. And also, one very important function here is the copy from previous month. Let's assume that you have 8 to 9, events that you're going to be reporting. You can use this particular function to auto-populate on the previous month. And also, you can use this add row function to add additional events. And in the event, like Angela mentioned, that in the event that maybe for some reason your facility does not have the capability to submit this data that you initially thought you'd be able to submit, you may want to, uncheck all that as an example, that I'm no longer following this, but we can't delete it because the system will not allow us to do that. So it's very important to come here and report that no long-term care facilities component models followed for this month. And you check that. So after we complete the monthly reporting plan, the next thing that is important for us to complete is the event. And like we mentioned, here we have three options. You can add an event, you can find an event, as well as you can also review your incomplete events. Let's look at how to find an event as an example. Here we have three different ways in which we can find events. We can use event information, we can also use resident information, as well as general information. If you know the event number, you can enter the event number here and search for that particular event. If you know the resident number, you can maybe enter that and find that as well. Here we have some resident with that particular number. If you go back, you can also search events by locations. We have different locations here in which you can find events. Let's say, for example, we're interested in looking at events in our dementia unit. All we have to do is to enter dementia unit and click on find event. Unfortunately, we don't have that now, or it's been deactivated. Let's check something else. Here we have a bariatric unit events. For the general information, we can use that to check the completion status. Let's say we would just want to check, all the events that are completed. We check yes for completion status and click on find. And as you can see on the far right, we have only events that have completed status. So what else can we do with events? Let's go to here we have an incomplete event showing in here. And basically what we're going to do is we want to resolve this event. Typically, so you can use this particular view to actually review your events. And if you want to make the corrections, you make sure that you check, you look at all the asterisks, for example, and see maybe where there might be an issue. In this particular case, as we can see at the bottom here, we have the specific events open, not completed. And this is basically due to the fact that the specified criteria used here were not selected. So that's why we have an incomplete event. When we get to alerts, we're going to show how we're going to resolve that. So let's move from events to summary data. Like we showed in the model that we looked at earlier about the numerator and denominator data, the summary data is synonymous to the denominator data. And with the denominator data, we can add, we can find, and we can also review our incompletes. This is the view for adding summary data. And we want to make sure that all the asterisks are completed here for us to be able to complete the summary data. We can also find summary data. We can check for a particular month, for example, or just a particular year. And by this, we can view all the summary data submitted for this particular year. So besides summary data, the next thing we can look at is alerts. And this is where we're talking about the quality. We talked about missing events, we have incomplete events, we have missing summary data as well as incomplete summary data. For the missing events, we want to click on the missing events to see the events that we have that are missing. So once you open the missing events tab, Here we have two events that we need to resolve. And basically, what all we need to do to resolve this particular event is to check here, report no events. This is the reason why we're having a missing event here. And once that is done, we make sure we save so that we can resolve that particular event. Here we have an incomplete event. Similarly, you want to click on the event number to be able to open that event and resolve that event. In this particular case, we're looking at a UTI event. So again, look at your asterisks to see if there's any information that is missing, and that will point you to exactly where the issue might be so that that can be resolved. In this particular case, again, the specific event here is missing, so we want to make sure we resolve that. So let's see. First of all, we want to click on edit before we can do that. For the secondary bloodstream infection, we can say no. Once we do this, we need to enter information for the pathogens here as well. And this is the sensitivity test for the antibiogram. And for this particular case, let's say we have to look at the drug and how sensitive are the pathogens to this drug. And here we have all these letters we have here. We have that information on our form at the bottom. S is for sensitivity, R is for resistance, I is for intermediate, and N is for the test is not checked. So once we resolve that, we go down and click save. And by so doing, we resolve the incomplete events. Here again, we have a lot of missing summary data. We can go in there and do the same. Also, we can do the same for incomplete summary data to resolve that. So moving from summary, the alerts, one other thing that we can do is let's talk about users. In your facility, if you have somebody that is new, like Angela mentioned, and you want to add the person, you come to the user functionalities and you click on add. It takes you to this form which you have to complete. Again, for the user ID, typically we do, first name, first initial, and last name, and make sure that you have all the information here correctly. Most importantly, the email, because this is the email that the individual is going to receive. This is also the email that the individual is going to use for their SAMS registration. It is very important that we have this correct. Also, from the user function, we can also find users in our facility. If you have a ID or name for a particular user you're looking for, you can input that here. Otherwise, you can just click find and you get a view of all the users in this particular facility. Again, you have the opportunity here to add a user if you have somebody new in your facility that you're trying to add to the list. And if you do so, you have to go through the step of like giving the person some rights on what they can do with this application. So, taking a step to look at facility itself, we can use this facility function here to do a couple of things. We can use the customized form to add additional information for the forms. For example, the survey form that we have, or the event form, the summary data form, as well as the resident form. We can add additional information that is specific of interest to our facilities. So you can use this particular function for that. From the form type here, we have three types showing here. We have the event form, the summary data, as well as the resident, which you can modify. So again, let's take a quick look at analysis. For analysis, the tab you're looking at here, it shows the range of data that we have. But the first thing you want to do to make sure you have an accurate data is to generate new data. Otherwise, you're going to be analyzing based on what the previous, data that was generated. You don't want to do that because you're going to be missing out. If there's any recent data that was added and you just go on and do your analysis, you're going to be missing some of those numbers. So the first thing you want to do is to generate new data. I won't do that now because it's going to take some time. Once we generate that data, we can also come back to data and choose an report. So with the reports, we have a number of reports that you can run, here. But some of these reports, are useful, but it might not, you may want to improve on it. You may want to adjust that. And Elizabeth is going to be talking more about how to customize these reports. You may want to change the labels to make sense to what you're looking, or you may just want to include some variables of interest for your particular facilities. And just to give an example, when you click on each of these folders, it's going to give you examples of all the type of reports that we have in here. If we run this, it should show us a line listing of CDEF for this particular facility. So this is an example of what your facility can run. And Elizabeth is going to talk more about this on how to modify these reports. Well, with that, also there's also an important function here that Josephine is going to be also talking about later this afternoon. This is a visualization function that's going to also help uh, users better appreciate their data, better understand what is going on with the data that they're collecting, and hopefully able to use that for internal prevention purposes. So basically, this is just some of the ways in which you can approach the NHSN application. We have the form that I mentioned earlier that's in your tab is a very, very important guide that you can use. So make sure you use that as an important resource. So again, we have some important information here that serve as best practices that you can use. Sometimes the type of back button that you need to use the one in the application, not the one in the browser, so that you don't get locked out. And also some other very, very useful information that will guide your interaction with the application. With that, I'll end it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask now. Yes, please.
And there was a steps for us to start sending that. Oops. There's a step to send the information, and I just wanted to know I wanted to, or if my facility will start, or can we go ahead and start submitting for the MDRO and urinary tract infection so we can have a better survey, or there's a step that I need to do too?
Where's your facility right now? What
Because,
module are you?
well, I already have a SAMS grid card,
Okay.
and we last year the NSHN, or I'm not sure if it's a or age SAG, has, asked if we wanted to join to participate on this 1 year survey program for CDPCL, and that's why I was able to get that card. And right now we're only participating on CDPCL submission. And my question is, can I go ahead if I wanted to do the MDRO and the urinary tract infection? Can I just go ahead and start submitting data or
Yes,
events?
in your monthly reporting plan, yeah, you can just begin to identify that I'm interested in, following this particular event going forward or model. Yes, you can do that.
I can do that. There you
Yes.
go. That's all. Thank you.
Yes. And any other question? Well, if no question, thank you very much for your audience. Appreciate it.